Hey, you guys. Happy Monday. I'm super excited for tonight's live. So, y'all come on in here. And when you pop in, please let us know where you're tuning in from. Tonight, we have a very special live. We have our virtual book launch of these amazing women who have taken the time and the bravery and have chosen to share their stories. I don't know if y'all have the copy of your book in hand, but do you have it? Do you have it? Woo! Yay! So excited. Hey, Karen. So I'm super excited because these ladies have taken the time to write their story down on paper. And I know that that was not an easy choice because we know what comes with not just telling our story, but saying or writing our story down on paper. So give me 30 seconds. I just want to do some housekeeping and make sure. Can anybody tell me we look all right, y'all? How does it look? Anybody can see on the computer? All right, let me look real quick, make sure we're okay before we hit go because we want to make sure that people can see us, they can hear us. Okay, we're good. Okay, awesome. So please, hey, from Australia. Oh my goodness. Several people from Australia, South Carolina, Nebraska. Hey, you guys, come on in here. Hey, Tommy. Yes, Karen, we're wonderful. So tonight, they said we look beautiful. Say hey. Okay. So please take a second to introduce yourself. And I'm going to start in my upper right corner with Miss Rector, Tracy Rector. Hey, Tracy.
Hi.
I'm please take a second.
I'm from Texas.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Who are you?
Well, for the last couple of years, I have been executive producing a movie called No Ordinary Love, which is to raise awareness of domestic violence. So that has consumed my life for the last 2 years. And we are at the point where we're ready to launch it this weekend at a couple of drive-in theaters. One in Texas, one in Florida. So we're really excited about that, and we're making some noise and getting some attention and hoping to get picked up so we can stream this movie in every home in the United States if someone's interested, so we can help people learn more about this, so they can either realize that they themselves are in an abusive relationship, or they can have a better understanding of it when someone cries out to them about their own experience.
Yes, I love that you said you're making noise because literally you're making noise. Look at all the Texans in the comments. They're like, Texas, Texas. I love that you are making noise. And I even respect it so much, Tracy, because you've dedicated the last several years of your life to making noise about domestic violence. So hats off to you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Miss Donna, please say hey. We can't hear you. You got to unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Donna Marie Lambert. I am a hairstylist for 37 years. I'm a mother of 3, grandmother of 5, and I'm a paparazzi consultant as well for 3 years. And I've been a survivor, domestic violence survivor for 13 years. Wow. And that's me.
That's awesome. A stylist, I know you know hair. You have grandchildren. You're blessed with children and grandchildren. That is amazing. So thank you so much for being on here, Donna. And last but not least, Miss Teresa, Miss Simon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Simon, and I'm coming to you from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I've been in 2 abusive relationships, and I am the founder and the executive director of a nonprofit organization out of Kenosha, Wisconsin.
All right, what's the name of the organization?
Oh, yes. NDV Healing and Support Incorporated.
And that stands for?
Narcissistic Domestic Violence.
All right. I love it. So, ladies, let's get to it. You introduce yourself. We are here to talk about the book, My Secret Life, right? And it talks about my journey through domestic violence. And these are 3 of the ladies that are in the book. So let's talk about real quick, because Donna, I'm going to start with you. I'm putting you on the spot, Donna. You know why? Because you told us that, well, this is your first time ever really sharing your story. Yes. Is that right? Absolutely. Okay, so how did you make that decision to not just share your story, but put it down on paper?
Well, actually, I've been trying to write my story for many years. And I would get to a certain point and I couldn't go any further, so I would put it down. What made me do it this time, actually, it was really by chance. I saw the advertisement on Instagram from Lisa, and I was like, what? So I hadn't had anything written down or anything. But what I would like to say is what gave me my voice is that my cousin, my youngest cousin, who was actually in my wedding in 1976, she got killed in 2016 in her sleep, her husband shot her in the head. And that is what gave me, I believe, my voice, because I remember trying to get to the, I always forget the name, but when you go out and we rally and we take posters, and I forget the name of what we call it here in Rome, New York, in central New York. But I just had to get there. And really, I went to tell the story about my cousin. And I wind up telling the story about myself. And I was shaking like a leaf, didn't know that was gonna come out my mouth about my story, but it did. And here I am. It just happened. It really just happened. What I had, 4 weeks to write my chapter, which seemed like a real short period of time, but here I am today. It's done, right?
Yeah, and you did it. What I love about what you said is like you've been writing it for a long time, and I think that's a lot of people who say I'm going to write it down. And a lot of times, even though we journal it, we talk about it, but we're like, writing in a book, that's a little bit much. My abuser may see it. Their family may see it. What if people at my church see it? Like, what's going to happen if they read what really happened to me and who I really am? Because we all know with domestic violence, a lot of the truth we don't talk about. A lot of the truth we don't share. But when you write it down, you have an opportunity to share so much more. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more, Donna, in a second. But it is devastating, like Pilar said, about, your family member who was killed, who was shot in the head during their sleep due to domestic violence.
Yes.
Yeah. So Teresa, talk to us. I know that you recently started a domestic violence organization and you chose to write your story.
Yes. I chose to write my story because I wanted, first of all, as a founder and executive director of a nonprofit, I come across a lot of domestic violence victims, and it would be very difficult, that they're sharing their story with me, but I don't share my own story. Mm-hmm. So I realized that it was time for me to start sharing my own story.
Wow, that was good. So how did it feel to have to write it down? Because your chapter was great too. I'm reading it like, oh my goodness, because you have, you have children, there's people that experience this domestic violence with you.
Yeah. And then also, because as you know, during pregnancy, that's a huge time where domestic violence increases. So that was something else that I experienced. So there were things actually, because I had told my story in verbally, but I had never done it in a book before. And so there were things that I actually put in there that I had never spoken about before. So it was like a therapeutic type of experience.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be writing it down. And I think it can be really scary too, because I know I experienced that with some of the authors that I work with. They're like, it's done. But what are people going to say? How are people going to judge me? What if they know this part of me? They're going to look at me differently. And so I super duper commend you guys because you guys were transparent, you were vulnerable, and you were honest about your journeys. So Tracy, I know that you are sounding the alarm, but I think this is the first time you wrote your story. Is that right?
It's the first time I've written it down. I've spoken several times in public. And, it's when you ask that question, why did you write your story at this point? I didn't just wake up and decide I'm going to do this. I think it was kind of a gradual progression, having a very gentle introduction into telling my story to a small group at first. And then the word gets out. And I was asked to speak in front of other groups. And I'm still being asked to do that. And it's terrifying to do it. From my perspective, it was because I thought not many, if any, would believe my story, because it just doesn't seem possible because of who my abuser was. He was a very well-known person in the community, very well-respected minister, and everybody wanted to believe him and not me. At least that's what I thought. And so it took me a few years to get to the point where I was comfortable talking about it that much publicly. And then this opportunity came along to do this. And literally, I think I wrote mine in about 3 or 4 days because I was so busy with the movie. I didn't really have time, but I'd written so much of it down. That what I find so funny is that since it's published, there's so many other things about my story that keep popping up into my head and I'm sure others too, because how much can you tell in one chapter, right?
Yeah,
There's
really.
more than that. It's very complex. And I'm fascinated what Teresa is doing with her organization, because narcissism certainly adds an interesting twist to domestic violence. And I experienced that myself. And it amplifies it in some ways, but it also makes it harder for the victims in a lot of ways, because one of the key characteristics of a narcissist is to be a compulsive liar. And so everybody on the outside believes them. So you have to really speak up your voice and believe yourself. I think that's why one of my biggest mantras through all this is to start by believing. And that I think that's the best advice we can give others who ask about it. What do you say to someone who talks to you about it? Well, you start by believing. Because maybe that's because it was so personal to me.
Wow. That was really good. You made a lot of points. So I wrote a couple of things down because I wanted to touch on something you said. One of the things you talk about is believing yourself. And I think that that's really big, because I know for myself, even it wasn't until I found out someone else had experienced his abuse that I finally took the time to believe myself, because I know I wasn't crazy. I knew what I had experienced, but they make you feel crazy, and they make it feel like it's not real. And so you have trouble believing yourself. And I think that we have to trust ourselves, believe ourselves. We know what we experience, and stand in that truth. You know what I mean? And I want to encourage those survivors. I see you guys over there commenting that you're a survivor. We celebrate you, because we know that it wasn't easy. And I think another thing you said was really important, that you have to fight to tell your story, because it's so true that oftentimes people are quick to believe the abuser. And then as a victim, you have to fight to share what happened to you.
You do, and you put yourself out there with this risk that you won't be believed. But I think at some point, as you get your strength back and you become your true self, you regain your self-worth, then you say it anyway, because you're saying it for other reasons. You're saying it in spite of someone who maybe isn't going to believe you, and you don't listen to that background noise. And you speak up for all the women who maybe aren't strong enough to speak about their own experience. And I think a lot of us who never experienced the harsh physical abuse always questioned yourself, is it really abusive? Because for the longest, it hasn't been but maybe 10 years that in this whole issue that we've even discussed the emotional abuse as being as difficult as the physical abuse. Before it was just mostly focused on the physical. And so you really doubt yourself. Is it abusive? Because people will ask you, well, did he ever hit you? Or he would even say, I don't hit you. How can you say it's abusive? That sort of thing. So you question yourself a lot, and you have to understand. So at first you think it's just that my marriage is hard. It's difficult, but you don't really know how to define that it's abusive until you hear those words either through someone else's story or by reading it somewhere. And you come to the conclusion that, yeah, and you accept that. And I think it takes that. You have to accept the fact that you were in this abusive relationship, this abusive marriage. And mine was 23 years. That's a long time. So I feel like I have a little bit of this personal responsibility for that decision to stay in that marriage for that long, trying to make it work for that many years. But a lot of us that are women of faith, we feel like that we're obligated to do that.
Yeah, so true.
Teaches us, but that's not as we know, the healthy side of our faith. So
yeah, very true. You talk about that, and you guys chose to speak up in spite of what would happen.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. So Donna, let's touch on that a little bit. And you talk about the risk of speaking up, because there's risk in sharing your story. So Donna, tell us a little bit. Don't give us too much of the goodies, but a little bit, something about your story that you share in the book. And can you guys do me a favor? If you're not talking, just mute your mic real quick, so I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. But Donna, if you could share with us a little bit of something that you shared in your book that you thought, oh my goodness, I would never have shared this with someone, or you tell us a little bit.
Well, yeah, the beginning of my abuse started with me being molested by my stepfather. And that's something that I never, ever, 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 ever wanted, definitely not write down, and definitely not have published. And my main reason why is because I have 3 siblings. That's their dad. And I didn't want to hurt them, and I didn't see why I needed to do it anyway. I really didn't see why I needed to do it. So that's why I never did it. Okay. What inspired me to do it was one of my life coaches. And she just said to me, like, you got a story, and there's someone out there that needs to hear your story, and you can help them. So she basically told me to kick my ego to the side. It's my choice. And stand up, speak out, show up, and help somebody. And that is the only reason to be honest, why I wrote the book, because she said it may help somebody. Because
Yeah.
other than that, I would not have put it down on paper and had it published, and now we're on Facebook. You know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
I understand. And I understand that, because a lot of times our journeys sometimes stem from something, maybe a situation or an occurrence. And so I mean, it's as painful as it is and as difficult as to share that, you then kind of talk in your story how it affected your self-worth and who you were as a person. And then it made you just started to make choices in relationships as a result.
yes,
And
yes,
so so touching on that, I think it's hard, as difficult as it was. I mean, it says a lot about the next steps in your journey, and it will help
exactly.
someone. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, well, first of all, I thought that I knew it wasn't love, but that's all I knew as far as relationships was concerned. So it's like I went, every person I attracted was abusive, very abusive, not just physically abusive, emotionally abusive, financially abusive. And I did it for 3 times, 3 different relationships. My marriage was 9 years, and I stayed in it for 9 years. And I'm not going to say I'm glad that it was physical, but I am, because if it was just, and I'm not saying just to lighten it, but I know me, and if it was just about somebody, you know, calling me names or doing this or doing that, I probably would have been in it for a long time too. But once the hitting, you know, the beatings, the smacking, the knocking down, and all those things came about, well, I was going to get killed. That was the bottom line. You know, when I saw my life flash in front of me with a knife to my throat, I knew 9 years was enough of that. You know, I knew that I had to go. And if I didn't go, my children was not going to have a mother, and they definitely wasn't going to have a father, because he was going to jail. You know, one way or another, somebody was going to send him to jail. You know, so but because I didn't get the help that I needed, I got some psychological help, but they just labeled me an alcoholic. And see, I think that that's the problem, where we may start to drink or do this or that, but I don't think they ever touch the issues of the PTSD that I have. I'm not even going to say had, that I have. And,
Yeah.
You know, those things everything hasn't even been addressed to this day, because I kept doing the same thing over and over again. So I attracted, but the blessing is that they got lesser. So where one was 9 years, the next one was only 3 years. Now the next one was 5 years, but I just want to say that each and every one of these people I met, one was a Bible toter. He was saved, sanctified, and full of the Holy Ghost. That was my first husband. The second one, I met him in a program, a positive place. I didn't meet these people, so to speak, in the street. And then the next one, I met him dancing and shouting in church, you know, playing the guitar and singing to the Most High, to the Lord. You know, so I thought I was meeting good people. You know, I thought I was meeting people that were going to treat me like a human being. And I found out that they're human just like I am, and that they had issues. And I kept attracting that to my life because I didn't get the help I needed.
So I'm going to touch on that. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, because oftentimes you may find someone that goes into a relationship after a relationship and it continues to be abusive. And so the cycle continues. So I'm going to come back to you, Donna. We're going to kind of touch on that as well, because I think, because you said it, you just said it. You said, because I didn't heal. Because I didn't heal. And that's a key point. We'll come back to that, because I know, Teresa, you also were in 2 abusive relationships, correct?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your story, or what something significant you want to share within what you wrote about.
Yeah, so I was in 2 abusive relationships, and the interesting thing was there was a 10-year span gap in between the 2. So I mistakenly thought that I was healed, because I thought, well, there was, 10 years between that first one, so I'm never going to get into an abusive relationship again. But I didn't do any work in that 10-year span. I didn't do any counseling. I didn't work on any healing. 10 years had just passed. So unfortunately, I just repeated the same thing, and I found myself in another abusive relationship. The other thing,
Wow. Wow. But you know how, I know your thing is do the work. We always talk about you have to do the work. Time is not what is going to help you move on to the next relationship healthy. You have to do the work. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I didn't do any of the work, and so that's how I found myself in that second situation. And then the other thing too that I talk about in my book that I haven't really shared too much about in my story, when I share my story, is that how I ended up in an abusive relationship. A lot of times, you have to get to that root of the problem to figure out why you are attracting this. And that was the other thing. I never did that. I had to finally deal with the issues that I had with my dad. I never dealt with that.
Okay. That was very interesting. I like that introspective look. And I think when you step out and you're out long enough, you can take that introspective look and kind of take a look at yourself and kind of see, well, how do I not repeat this cycle? What things do I need to work on within myself so that I'm able to recognize these red flags, the next time around?
Yeah.
And so I want to go back to Tracy real quick, because Tracy, you talked about, it was a lot of emotional and psychological abuse. And you thought to yourself, well, it's not physical, so no one's going to believe me. But also, is it actually abuse? So what would you tell to someone who may be experiencing that same thing and feels like, well, maybe it's not bad enough, or maybe it's not serious enough?
Well, I think a really important thing to know as a victim or survivor is to trust your instincts. Right. I came from a very loving family, so I knew the whole time that my marriage didn't look anything like my parents' marriage, and quite frankly, any marriage that I was able to be a part of, friends or family. So I knew there was something wrong. But with all the psychological and emotional abuse, they convince you that you are the problem, right? And so mine was even a little bit more nuanced because it was spiritual abuse and he was a minister. So that added a very difficult nuance for me, because then it was him and God against me. So that was a difficult place for me to be. And I wanted to emphasize how important it is to do the work. You have to do the work. If you want to have a healthy relationship, you have to do the counseling. It's not something you can just do with your girlfriend. It has to be someone who really understands this social ill, the domestic violence. And if they're, like what Teresa works on, if they're narcissistic on top of that, that really takes some specialized counseling to take care of, because they can be very charming, lovable people that other people respect and look up to. And that's just added confusion to the victim and the survivor of keeping that thought in their head that it must be something wrong with me because everybody else loves him, respects him, thinks he's a great guy. Why don't you look at him like that? And he keeps telling you those things too.
That's really good. The added confusion. And I think that's a really basic, simple way to say it, because it's added confusion. You start to question yourself. Is this really happening? They said they were sorry. Maybe it's me. If I just did this better. And then you're second guessing yourself, just making yourself absolutely, crazy. But Iris made a good point. She said, I'm doing the work. She said, I'm going to counseling, therapy, journaling, being honest with myself. And oftentimes, we share some stuff here and they say, well, it's victim blaming. And we don't victim blame as having been victims ourselves. But we do say you have to do the work. It doesn't. And I think Teresa was such a great example of that when she said, I was out of the relationship for 10 years, thought I was okay and ready to date again. And then ended up after 10 years going into an abusive relationship. And so, a few of them have already said, but counseling is very important with therapy. I say therapy and Jesus, whatever works for you, but therapy should definitely be one of those things. But I think it's important to get with someone who is trained in domestic violence or trauma therapy or something like that, because if they don't understand the dynamics of domestic violence, they're not going to be able to address the situation. And that's also the same if you're in a domestic violence situation and they send you to couples therapy. They're not trained in domestic violence, because
it can be very dangerous. Actually, it can do more harm than good. And that's important to know that. I think another thing that's just as important as doing the work is to, however you do it, you find a way to forgive yourself, because there's a lot of self-guilt and shame in this, because you allowed it to go on for so long. You didn't stand up to it enough to make it stop. You didn't leave sooner. All of those things rolled into that whole guilty thing. And when you're starting to deal with that, when your self-esteem and self-worth is so low, so it's really hard I think to get to that point where you can do that. But that's really important, to forgive yourself.
Yeah, and recognize, Tracy, too, that you did the best you could. You know, maybe it was children, maybe it was finances, maybe it was confusion, maybe it was self-worth, whatever. Forgive yourself because you did the best that you could. And so that's what I mean. Stand Up Survivor is huge on that. It's education, it's awareness. Now you know. We're telling you that this is not healthy. We're showing you that it's not okay. And we're trying to give you options of what you can do.
Yeah.
So so someone asked a question: are all people that abuse in any form are narcissists? No, all abusers are not narcissists. Okay. And so Teresa, I'll let you answer that before I go back to Donna, but I know that you specialize in narcissistic abuse. So did you want to address that at all?
Yeah, so a lot of people sometimes mistakenly think that all abusers are narcissists. Not all of them are narcissists, so no. But there are a lot of them that are. And just like the domestic violence, has its own wheel of, the honeymoon and the tension building. Well, the narcissistic has its own wheel of the idealization phase, devaluation phase, and then discard. So the other thing, too, that I want to say about narcissistic abuse is domestic violence. So, but yeah, not all abusers are narcissists, though.
Yeah, and I think that's very clear because that phrase, that word is thrown around a lot, and everyone who's a narcissist is not an abuser, and vice versa. So it's very important to distinguish between those two. Oh, Haley, don't say that. She said, "Stand Up Survivor saved my life." Don't make me get all emotional. Thank you, but I mean that's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. So we're glad to know that Stand Up Survivor helped to save your life. That's huge. So. Don, I want to talk about, I know there's a part of your story, I don't want to give away too much, but you talk about how you were physically dragged down the stairs in front of people. Physically, they watched you be abused. I mean, what were you thinking during that time that was happening to you?
I just wanted him to get off me. I wanted him to stop, but I wanted the people that were sitting on the porch to help me, to stop him. But they didn't. He beat me up the block, not just down the steps, but up the block, down the block, and back up the steps. And they're sitting there and on the porch, but then you got to understand, they were sitting there drinking their beers and their alcohol and stuff like that. But still, I didn't get that. I didn't understand that. How could, it was my mother-in-law and her husband and a friend that I knew very well. And I'm just like, wow, how could you sit here and watch him do this to me? Like, how do you do that? I always would say, I didn't meet evil. I'm from the Bronx, New York. And I'm telling you, I've seen some things. I'm from the late 60s and 70s, and I've seen a lot of violence and stuff. But I never seen the violence like that. Like, I mean, I had my own issue with my stepfather, but I never saw all of that. It seemed to be a loving family, but I seen a lot of gangs and things like that. Even when you see people you don't know that's being stabbed and abused and stuff like that, you try to help them. You at least call 911, right? And I just couldn't understand how they could sit there and just watch him do that to me.
I know, and it has to be heartbreaking because you already feel like, first of all, it's embarrassing. You're in pain. You're being hurt, and people are watching this happen. And literally, all you want is someone to help save you. And,
just help me. Yeah,
they don't.
Yeah, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen until I left. I had to leave because there was more. I was telling this story yesterday, and I had went. My mother-in-law told me to go to get an order of protection. So I went to get the order of protection. Before I got home from getting the order of protection, someone there knew her and called her and told her I had got an order of protection. And that granted me a beating down we called it the back hall steps. It was from the second floor all the way down to the basement. And they were spiral steps. And I just went boom, 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 all the way down the steps. And that's because before I got home, I didn't even get the papers yet. But before I got home, the court system, the people there had already called the home and told them. So I didn't feel safe there. Although I lived there 30-something years, it's like I was just, I was like, that's not your town. Because they used to say that's their town. You ain't from here. This is our town. And, you know,
That's so hard. I mean, if people just understood the dynamics of domestic violence, they wouldn't even put their mouth on it. And then to think of what you have to do when you go home. And I mean, as significant as, hey, if I'm getting an order of protection, I am in danger, physical danger. Why would you do that? And then I think about the same thing. Well, I'm going to my minister, or my leader, or my pastor, and I'm saying, I need help. You're thinking, oh, okay, well, let me put you in a room with your abuser. Let's have a chat, not realizing that I'm also putting you in danger in that instance, you know? And so with that, Tracy, I'm going to go back to you. Let's talk really quickly about the spiritual abuse aspect, because without putting a hand on you, he was literally able to control the way you did your hair, the things that you did, where you went. And so tell us a little bit about how that works. And what would you say to someone who's experiencing the same thing now?
Well, I think it's important if church is something that's a part of your life and your faith, whether it's the Christian church or some other religion, that you own your faith, that no one else can be a part of that. And I think that's what the abuser with the spiritual abuse tries to do, is they try to be in charge of your spirituality and tell you what God is saying to you through this activity or that action, or disobedience, or whatever it is that you have exhibited that they don't like. So that I think one thing that's really important to understand about domestic abuse is that it's always about power and control. It's not just physical. It's power and control over your finances. It's power and control over the way you dress, or the way you talk, or who you see, or when you go out. It's power and control. So if in my situation, he was a minister, so of course it was an easy avenue for him to inflict some of that abuse, was through the spiritual aspect of it, because he was in that position. And I think that's what makes it really difficult, is when I think some churches do encourage it, and because they have this patriarchal setup for their church. And that makes it a little bit easier for someone to be abusive with that. And they use their own misogynistic ways, and they look for scriptures to justify that. And then they inflict that within that relationship. And that does make it very difficult to keep your faith. I think when I first started speaking about this, I realized that as a victim, as a survivor, that would be the main thing that you would have to fall back on, is your faith, that you could have this relationship with your Lord that would give you the strength to get through this, to help guide you to the other side of it. And it's difficult when that becomes broken.
Yeah, that's a really big point that you said, especially and someone kind of said it in the comments, if that's your faith, first of all, no one can control your relationship with God. That's you and him. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe what anybody else says. It's yours, because therefore no one else can control it. You know, and I remember, I don't know, I was talking about spiritual abuse, and said, well, I think it was Loriana, but she talks about how he would make the decisions for her relationship with God, which is, they can't do that. And through that, they exhibit the spiritual abuse. But another thing is, if someone is experiencing abuse, whether it's in your mosque, in your church, and that's their foundation and family, and they leave and they're shunned, that's one of the most devastating things that can happen for them, on top of their marriage ending.
It is. And especially with him being a minister, which meant I was a minister's wife, there was a lot of feedback that I would get when we actually did separate physically. I had a lot of people giving me commentary on what their thoughts were on that, and what their thoughts were on what Jesus thought about that, and which was interesting to me, that seemed like a very bold thing to do to someone. Is to tell them what you think Jesus is telling them, or what their faith or their God is telling them about you. That's not the way to do that. That's not a very kind thing to do. So
and it can be really painful. And then they're re-victimized.
It was. Well, I think and that's what really gave me the strength to stand up and say, this is over. We're separating, because it became so bad that even the thought of how bad it was going to be to break up the marriage, it wasn't as bad as what I was living on a daily basis.
Wow. I think that's a really powerful statement. As bad as it would be to leave the relationship, would it still not have been as bad staying in it? I mean, it was worse to stay in it than it was to stay.
It was worse to stay because we would just, part of my story is, so I had pulled away emotionally because of certain things that had happened, and was really struggling with, what do I do with this now? How do I deal with this? Knowing that I cannot live the rest of my life with this marriage. the way it is. And I went to therapy and I tried some of the things that the therapist suggested to see if I could repair it and make it work. And it got worse, which she warned me about. It got worse. And so as the more I pulled away emotionally, the harder it became. Because if you know anything about narcissism, they need that as much as they need air and water and food. They have to have that narcissistic supply. And if you shut that down, their dysfunction becomes it skyrockets. It's really difficult. And the more that they feel like their power and control is being pulled away from them, the more desperate they become.
Yeah, absolutely. And Deronda just kind of said that in the comments, that sometimes when you try to leave, that's when it gets worse. And statistics do prove that it's a lot worse. But in Tracy's particular situation, it was better for her to leave than to stay. And even in my situation, I think every situation is different. Even though the risk of danger has increased once a survivor decides that she is going to leave. That's a fact. It's statistically proven. A lot of women die as a result, but it is more. I knew for myself, I knew he was going to kill me. So to me, it was like, I either choose, I have to fight and leave for my children, or I stay in whatever this situation is. So I want to tell you
that question that comes up when the question comes up, why didn't she just leave? Most of the time when a woman dies at the hands of her abuser, she is either in the process of leaving or has already left. And they do become exponentially more dangerous for the most part. Not all of them are correct to kill their victims, but that's where a lot of the fatalities happen, is when she's in the process of leaving. It's very dangerous.
And that is a fact. And so we always say, like me and Tracy were talking about this before we got on, you don't need to make any grand announcements. You do not have to ask your permission. You need to get with an advocate, safety plan, and get yourself and your children to safety. You don't have to say, I'm leaving you, I want out of here, because then they're realizing the power and control that they're losing. And if I can't have you, no one can have you. And therefore, the risk is extremely high. No announcements are necessary. Get with someone who can help you to get to safety.
That's why calling a hotline is so important, because the hotlines will help you with a safety plan.
Yes.
And with the agency in our area that I work with, we say that the victim knows their abuser better than anyone. So for someone to tell a victim that they need to leave immediately, you have to leave today, that may be more dangerous. She may know something that's coming up that would make it a lot safer for her to leave. And she's working on the details. She's working on getting her plan in order so that she can leave safely with her children and all of that. Exactly. So we have to trust them to know what they do. But that's why the hotline is so very, very important.
Absolutely. And I put it up there on the screen, 1-800-799-7233, domestic violence hotline. I want to touch on pregnancy and domestic violence. And I know that you experienced that during your pregnancy, Teresa. So tell us a little bit about what that looked like for you.
Yeah, so actually, again, there was pieces in the book that I have never talked about. So I was actually, the first time that I actually experienced physical domestic violence was during my pregnancy. And I was actually thrown through a wall. So that was the very first time that happened. And yeah, it was completely shocking, because you think, okay, we're just arguing and, I'm going to get up and leave, which was what I was getting ready to do. I'm going to leave and I'm going to walk out, and this is going to be the end of this argument. And then the next thing I know, I'm being thrown through a wall.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And so did you think in that moment, I'm pregnant with your child? What was happening here? And how long after that did you stay? Like, why was that not for you? Like, I'm leaving.
Oh, I stayed a lot longer after that. So yeah, that unfortunately, I didn't leave right then, because there was many years after that I finally ended up leaving. I think too, like what Tracy talked about when she was talking about, one of the things is that a lot of times people ask, why do victims stay? And sometimes it is that, they are trying to leave. But another thing too is the trauma bond. That's another reason why victims stay. Mm-hmm. And another reason, so that was one reason in my case. The other reason was I thought, okay, well, I'm trying to make this work because there are children involved. But finally I got to a point where I was just like, children involved or not, I can't do this anymore. But for that incident, actually, unfortunately, it didn't end there. After I was thrown through the wall, then he started to strangle me. So then, unfortunately, that incident continued for a while.
Wow. And we all know that strangulation is a very, very heightened risk of lethality. Very,
Yeah.
very dangerous. Oh, well, he just choked me. No, he didn't choke. He strangled, and it's very dangerous. And so if you're experiencing that, know that because someone can literally kill you with their bare hands. Understand
Yes.
that that's a heightened level of danger. Right there. Hey, Miss China Robinson, come on in here, girl. Hey. Okay, so I want to touch on substance use and domestic violence, Donna. And I know you share a little bit about that during your story. So we're almost, I just want you to get a little, some of it, because I know we're touching on really different things here. And I know that people that are watching have experienced these things. So Donna, you want to touch on that a little bit and how that impacted the domestic violence in your life?
Yeah. Well, anyway, my husband, he actually taught me how to do drugs, how to do drugs. And he also taught me how to be a dealer. And yeah, he had me on the streets and everything, selling drugs. And I was out there like a fool doing it. I guess I thought I was invincible. As long as I did what he told me to do, that's all I needed to do. Whatever he told me to do, I was going to do it. And I did. And I'm going to touch on the pregnancy part. The reason why I always did what he told me to do, it seemed like I've been pregnant by him 3 times. I have 3 children. And each of those times were when I got the worst beating. The first time I got knocked down, punched down to the floor, 6 months pregnant. And yeah, and that was the beginning of my marriage. And no, I did leave, but I didn't stay out. I didn't stay out the relationship. And then baby number 2, he picked up a bifold door. So this is all, while all this is going on, a lot of drugs is going on. You understand? So a lot of drugs, a lot of using, a lot of dealing and stuff like that. And so I believe the drug of choice that was being used, it just made him more angry, a very angry, very violent person. To the point of him pulling out a bifold door when I was pregnant with my second child and beat me with it, and then took me to the 3rd floor balcony to throw me off of it. I was scared out of my mind, but still, I was more afraid. I was just afraid. I never really thought about leaving again. I just was so afraid. It's like you get so confused. Like you don't even, all you know is you got, like Teresa said, you have these children, and I'm married. We don't get married to get divorced. We get married to keep, right? To death do us part, right? But it wasn't going to be to death. It was going to be my death do us part. Yeah. And I'm just like, wow, so the drugs, I began, even after I left him, I was still using the drugs very heavily. I was addicted. And that was the main issues that my friends seen in me and told me I need to go to a meeting, and so I had a alcoholism counselor, and I had, I went to the program, to AA and Narcotics Anonymous and stuff. But like I said, the domestic violence issues, they weren't addressed. I have not to this day gotten counseling for that. I go to support groups here. Since COVID, we go virtually on Zoom. We have support groups, and that's where I go. And that's been since 2016. But before that, I've kind of been self-helping myself, trying to help myself to recover and to heal.
I'm really proud of you, Donna, for taking the time to be so vulnerable to share that, because I think people really miss some really, really key things about domestic violence and how important that substance use, drug use is in domestic violence, in the power and control. You don't hear a lot of people talk about that, but they manipulate their victim through the use of, like how he had you on the streets of drugs and even using. And it's another form of power and control that a lot of people don't talk about within domestic violence. And I really like that part of your story because it's pretty unique and people need to know about it, because let me tell you, I work with survivors who say this all the time. He made me do this. He made me do this drug. He makes me do this before we have sex. I'm telling you, it happens all the time. And so I just want to celebrate your bravery and your honesty in sharing that. So before we wrap up, I want to encourage you guys. I'm going to put their information on where you can follow these ladies, where you can grab their individual signed copy of their book. What would you tell? I'm going to have you all go around. What would you tell someone who is experiencing domestic violence or has experiencing is trying to get out? Because we're looking at ladies who have changed whose lives are look completely different than they did before. And so I'm going to let you touch on how you'd like to end. You could tell them a little bit about what you do now. You can give them hope on how to get out. I'll let you decide who wants to go first. Let's go. All right.
I'll step in first if you want somebody to. I think the best advice is to try to believe in yourself as much as you can. Remember what you were like before the abuse, before the abuser was in your life, and what you imagined your life to be like. I think that was something that was profound for me as a young woman, a young mother, a young wife, was that was not what I envisioned my life to be like when I was a child thinking about my future, or a teenager thinking about being married someday, something like that. But I think because you have so little left of you, it's really hard to tap into that. And that's what I think what we all do with our voice and telling our story is so vitally important, because someone who is so down and so beaten down by this emotionally in every other way, if they hear someone else speak up about it, they go, oh my gosh, look at that. She's telling her story. What I'm experiencing isn't right. It is wrong. It is abuse. And I need to do something about that. So I think that's really important. And that's really what's helped me speak out and not just tell my story, but just tell about domestic violence. I do not understand why we cannot get this issue in front of everybody. 1 in 4, 1 in 3 women are affected by this in their lifetime. Is there anything else that has that kind of number? Nothing even close to it. And I live in a large metropolitan city, and the city doesn't even have domestic violence as a line item in their budget. I mean, there's no excuse for that. Every city, every county should be contributing to their agencies that are in their area to help them address this. Police departments, the criminal justice, the court systems, all of those have to work together to have this, what we now call the coordinated community response, to really address it and take care of this issue. For years, we just sheltered the victims in a hidden way, and that's how we dealt with it. Well, we need to face it head on, and let's put the abuser in the spotlight, and let's deal with that as much as we can. That's why I made the movie No Ordinary Love. I really wanted to bring this conversation out of the shadows to let's focus on the victims and the survivors and helping them get their life back, but also stop victim blaming. Instead of asking, why didn't she just leave? Why don't we turn around and go, why didn't he just stop abusing her?
Right.
In all of those ways, let's start there with that conversation, and then let's figure out how to deal with that.
Absolutely. Let's hold the abuser accountable. I love that. And because we want No Ordinary Love. If we can get this streamed into homes, they can see, oh my goodness, this is not right. This is what I'm living. Wait a minute. And I think that's the thing. You watch a movie, we watch TV. I mean, especially during COVID quarantine, everybody's watching something. If Netflix picks this up, we are able to get into homes and tell people this is not normal. And I love that it's not like a documentary. It's actually a film where people can actually see regular lives going on through that.
It's a romantic thriller. It's entertaining. We wanted it to be that way because who's going to watch a documentary on domestic violence? That just sounds horrific. But a movie that has a compelling story about 2 women and how they try to find their way out of these difficult relationships. We've won lots of awards, and we are very ready to stream this movie in homes. It's just trying to get the attention so we can get the companies interested in it, so we can do that. So you can find us on our website, noordinarylovemovie.com. We're on Facebook, No Ordinary Love Movie, and Instagram, the same. And on Twitter, it's NOL Movie. So we are doing a limited release this coming weekend at 2 drive-ins, one at the Coyote Drive-In in Fort Worth and one at the Ocala Drive-In in Ocala, Central Florida. Yes. So we're excited about that, and because it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, all the proceeds will benefit the agencies in the area, and Stand Up Survivor, of course, is one of those to benefit from the Central Florida Drive-In. So if you are in either of those 2 areas, we really encourage you to go and get your tickets and see this film and help us spread some awareness.
Awesome. I love it. I love it, Tracy. Yay. All right, Teresa, we're going to go to you because someone actually had you answer this question? Someone said, how did you decide to heal? How did you heal after leaving? So before you give us your last words, please answer that question for someone in the comments.
Yes, I think that's actually a good question because, like I said, there was that big 10-year gap. So finally, I decided to make that step and go to counseling. And a lot of people I've talked to, many of the victims I talked to, they're very nervous about going to counseling. But what I try to remind them is it may not be a perfect fit on the first try. So don't give up. Don't let that discourage you. A lot of times victims, sometimes they'll let that discourage them and they'll say, well, I went to counseling and it didn't work. Maybe that therapist wasn't a match for you. And sometimes it may take you to try 2 or 3, and that's okay. But still keep going because it's really, really needed. You need to get to the root of the problem and to figure out why you're attracting this so that you can start to begin the healing process and get to a point where you can eventually have a healthy relationship. So I did start that process of finally going to counseling. So that's what helped me out.
That's really good. I love that. That was really, really good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And what I would say, because I think Tracy, she really touched on some really good things, but what I would say to domestic violence victims out there, or those that are in abusive relationships, there's 2 things. One, the first thing is that you're not alone. I think a lot of times, a lot of the victims I have encountered, they feel like they're alone, and they're the only one going through it. They don't know where to go for help, and just like there are so many agencies out there, just like Stand Up Survivors, one of them, and as well as NDV Healing and Support Incorporated. So I would encourage you to reach out to us because there are so many ways that we can assist you. So don't ever feel like you're alone and that this is something that you have to stay in. The other thing I would also say too is about the trauma bond, because a lot of victims, sometimes they don't know what it is. And once they do find out that it is an addiction, they feel like that they can't break it. Going no contact is absolutely the best. I mean, obviously, if you absolutely can't go no contact, then try the gray rock method. That would be the second best, but definitely try no contact because that's really helped me. I struggled, especially with the second abusive relationship. I struggled so much with the trauma bond, and the no contact is what really helped. There's actually an app called Day Count, and it's a free app on your phone. And if you download it, it will actually record for you the days and the weeks that you've been no contact. And once you have a tangible thing that you can look at and say, hey, I've been 3 months no contact, you'll start to see, and you'll start to be on that road and that path to staying away.
That's really good. I like. Did you say Day Count, like DAYCOUNT?
Yes.
That's good. It's interesting that you say that. Why would I need an app to help me realize? Because we're so used to being dragged back into their mess and their poison and listening to what they say, that going gray rock, going no contact can really, really help us begin to heal and process. So last but there's a lot of questions that we're not going to be able to answer them all. So hi, Sis Angela. Hey. All right. So last but not least, of course, if you can go ahead and tell us a little bit, what would you tell a victim of domestic violence who's currently still in a domestic violence situation, or any last words that you want to share, Donna?
What I would say is make a plan. Know that you're not alone. Reach out to these agencies that you heard about. Get some help, because a lot of us don't survive. We happen to be here to tell our story. But there's so many women, even with COVID. I don't know what the report is now, but I had heard the last time at least 9 women had gotten killed during the COVID time because, so if you heard anything here tonight that gives you that instinct or that knowledge that you're in a domestic violence situation, then you need to start to speak out. Find you some help. Find just somebody that you trust, someone that you can trust, that you can talk to, and make your plan. Don't talk about it like someone said earlier. Don't just make your plan of escape and get out, because you want to get out. We're here because we got out. My cousin for 2016, she didn't get out. And I don't really know the details, but I know she didn't get out. Yeah. She didn't make it. So I think you should speak out, and make a plan to get out. You're not alone.
Yeah.
And when you get out, get that counseling so you can stay out and don't repeat the same thing over again. Because just because you leave one person, like Teresa and I have experienced, there's someone else waiting for that unhealed person to use you again. So make sure you get the healing even after that. This counseling.
Wow.
Thank you.
That is so good. Y'all are on fire. Hey, Donna, mute your mic for me because it's crackling a little bit. But y'all are on fire. You guys gave such good tools and nuggets. First of all, healing is a journey. Like they said, healing takes time. It's not overnight. Hey, Alicia. Hi, sis. Sometimes it takes longer than usual. I'm 10 years out and I still have bumps in the road. And that's okay. I'm 10 years removed from what that pain and that experience was. So just take it as a day at a time and just keep going. Like Donna just said, we want you to live. Above anything else, we want you to live. And if that means that you may have to take some steps, you may have to pull up your bootstraps, do it through the pain, do it through the hurt, and save your life and that of your children. Someone asked in the comments a quick question about how do you not get jealous to know that your abuser is in a new relationship? And I would just say this, you know what it was like being in a relationship with them. And I know the feeling, and I kind of feel like I want to go oh my goodness. I want to kind of talk about it real quick. You do not have to be jealous because you know what you went through. You know exactly what you went through. So there's really no reason for you to be jealous. I would encourage you to say a prayer for them because you know what they're going to go through. And so Teresa, can you just talk about that real quick? Because I know that may be something that you do because you do feel that jealousy. Oh my gosh, they've moved on. What about me? They don't love me anymore. Maybe he'll treat her better than he treated me. False. Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you.
Super false. I actually experienced that myself, so I can actually talk from my own personal experience and as well as some of the survivors that have come to me for assistance. And yeah, it's natural to feel jealous in any relationship, when someone moves on, but they won't change. And so they're not going to. We have this as survivors, we have this thought or in our mind that they're going to get all the good parts, that beginning of that relationship where all the love bombing was happening and they were so sweet and they were so nice to you and stuff like that. Sure, they're going to get those parts, but they're also going to get the other parts too. They're going to get the abusive part because that mask is going to come off after a while. It's not going to stay on the whole time. And once it comes off, then they're going to get unfortunately, they're going to experience the same abuse that you experienced. So don't think that, they're going to get something that you didn't, like they're going to change for that other person. They're not going to change for that next relationship. It's going to end up in the same result. So like Lisa said, the best thing you can do is just say a prayer for that other person because they're about to endure what you went through.
Yeah, that's so good. And I know sometimes, well, if I talk to her, maybe she will move forward. She most likely will stay with the person. And you can put yourself in risk that way. And so you probably should, that's something you definitely want to stay out of. Tracy, I saw you unmute. Did you want to say something?
Well, just from what you said earlier about about talking about the fatalities, that I just wanted to make sure and reiterate that just because you aren't being physically abused does not mean that your life is not in danger. There are a lot of other signs and signals that we know about now because we've done the research and the science about it. And so that's one thing that calling a hotline can help you with. To see, they will give you a risk assessment and they will let you a danger assessment, and they will let you know what your risk is of fatality, of it escalating and being more dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke with a mom one time whose daughter was killed as a result of domestic violence. And the first time that she's aware that he put his hands on her is the day he killed her. Yeah. And so we cannot just assume that, well, they're not physically violent, so it would never. You call that hotline, get with an advocate, let somebody walk you through what it looks like. Because like Tracy said, there's a lethality assessment, there's a danger assessment that will ask you specific questions. Have they ever threatened? Is there a weapon in the house? Have they ever threatened to kill you? And so you want a professional that can help you with these things. So I put up on the banners these women, if you want to find them and follow them here. I can put this book up for you guys to get. And on our website as well. So please connect with these women. This is where they tell their story of surviving abuse. And if you think you heard something, trust me, you have not. I remember I was reading Tracy, when you talk about your chapter, you said, Well, shortly after I got married, I realized, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, like shortly after. So anyway, you've been over an hour. Thank you all for joining us. Ladies, I am so proud of you. I celebrate your bravery for sharing your story. I have no doubt, and you guys know that I don't have zero doubt that someone listened to your story tonight and that you have helped to save their life. So thank you guys. Pop back on and say bye to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us a chance to have our voice.
Every time, anytime. Ladies, don't go anywhere, but I'm going to say bye to the audience. See you guys tomorrow. We have Dr. Dunn on. We're going to be talking about HIV, STDs, and pregnancy, like coercion, where they force you to become pregnant, and domestic violence. There's connection. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. Look at Donna Brown's like, oh my Lord. Yes, it's going to be good. So we'll see y'all tomorrow, okay? Someone said, thank you so much. Another piece of the puzzle has been helped. So thanks, ladies. Stay on.